Greetings, ELK conference attendees. I'm Clint Carlson, Director of Digital Education Innovations at the University of Colorado, Department of Psychiatry. And with me today is Dr. Jessica Krueger. Dr. Krueger is the secondary principal and member of the leadership team at the Pechersk School International. PSI is an international school based in Kyiv, Ukraine. It is an IB continuum school that serves over 500 students ages 3 to 18 years old, coming from more than 52 countries. Students are now engaged in a remote learning program from many different locations around the world due to the invasion of their host country and the political unrest in Ukraine. Please note that this session is pre-recorded as we couldn't ensure the logistics of a live session during the dynamic, quickly changing events in Ukraine, but I will pass on any questions or comments to Dr. Krueger afterwards, and we'll get those answers back to you by email, Discord, or something else. The next 30 minutes of conversations will dive into what the last 2 years have been like at PSI, navigating teaching and learning through two major disruptions, the COVID-19 pandemic and now the current war in Ukraine overlapping. I suspect the 30 minutes is going to go by very quickly, so let's get started. Dr. Krueger, welcome and thank you for joining our conference this year. We've had many educators, primarily in Colorado, but all around the world as we're doing this remotely, who are eager to hear your perspective. Could you give us a brief overview of PSI and what the current status is as we're recording this?
Sure. First of all, thank you for asking me to join the panel. I'm happy to share kind of the experiences we've been through and hopefully others can learn from that. So PSI, as you said, is a dynamic learning institution. We have over 500 students from 52 different countries, mostly from the diplomatic and international business community, big headquarters for the UN and other embassies in the world in Kyiv. And so it is a pretty wonderful community to be part of. Currently, we are remote, but not remote with everyone in the same place. So we've been running a multi-dimensional, multi-time zone program since around February 1st, because that was when there was a first initial wave of evacuation out of Kyiv. Many members of the diplomatic community had to leave. About half of our students were in one part of the world or other parts of the world, and half of them were in Kyiv as we embarked upon that. But mid-February is when the escalation ramped up, and agencies really did require everyone to leave Ukraine. So right now we have had quite a few of our students, maybe about 40% of the population, find other international schools that took them in on scholarship for the remainder of the year. And it's been really wonderful for students to be able to have that face-to-face and this just outpouring of community support. We now have probably 300 students in our online learning program. In the secondary school, it's about 150 students. And we are using a module approach this time. So this time, because we've had many different versions of online learning, and every time we adjust and change and shift. But right now we have teachers developing modules where students can self-pace through the module. They have designated lesson times twice in a 6-day cycle. So students are coming in and interacting with teachers and connecting with them, but also have a module to follow where there are videos, where there's asynchronous tasks, where there's check-in points. And starting next week, we're even going to do a little bit more of enhancement into that program to bring more student connection and more engagement.
Wow, that's a lot. I mean, I want to ask about logistics, but I want to ask first, how's everyone doing? Like, how are you? How's the staff? How are the students? How's the community?
Yeah.
Everyone okay?
Everyone is safe. The majority of our community are outside of Ukraine. We do have some students and some of our staff members still in Ukraine. But for the most part, either the expatriate members of our community went to their home country or went to neighboring countries. Like myself, I didn't come home to the US, to Colorado, which is actually my home. I stayed in Eastern Europe and I've bounced around from Slovakia to Poland, and now I'm in Riga because I used to live here. So I came back to a familiar place. But it's been a ride, to be honest. We have a beautiful community. And just like that, it changed because we had to all shift to different locations. We've seen our children go to different schools. We likely have to downsize as we move through next year. So everyone's safe. And I think we ride these different waves. We are in a state of grief because we're losing our community in some ways. And we're just in a state of grief for what's happening in Ukraine. Our campus is safe in Kyiv. It has been a safe haven for members of our community. So we have around between 20 and 30, it sort of fluctuates, staff and their family, cleaning staff, some of our maintenance crew, they have moved into campus and they're living there because there's a basement, they can be underground, and it's safe. We actually are also stocked with a whole bunch of food. We have a generator. Those kinds of things are taking place right now. So that helps, even for family or faculty members and staff that are in Ukraine, they have a place that they can go. And many of our staff members that may be still in Ukraine have moved west. So I'm sure people have seen Lviv. So they're in Lviv, but they're also in Ivano-Frankivska and Ternopil, and some are right on the border between either Slovakia or Poland or Hungary. They're right on that border. But we're surviving. I feel like there are less tears than there were in the first couple of weeks by me, by others. And we're finding ways to stay connected, to ensure that our community is strong, and the outpouring of support that we've had from around the world is tremendous. And at some point in time in this, I'll share our social media platform, and you can share that with the community about all of the ways that we're engaged, and that they could get engaged if they want to support our school and Ukraine and know exactly where the money or their supplies are going.
That's
Plus, we have art
fantastic.
projects.
Sure.
So,
Wow. Thanks so much.
yep.
Even that answer for me was a bit of an emotional roller coaster. So I truly cannot fathom what it's like to be on your end.
I can talk about it without crying now.
Sure. No.
We would have done this a few weeks ago, the tears might have come and we would have
Sure.
had a pause, but I'm okay now.
Well, wonderful to hear all of that support happening from all those different angles. That's wonderful.
Mhm.
So logistically, all schools around the world have been struggling with the logistics of an ever-changing COVID situation and how things are
Mhm.
shifting on a day-to-day basis. How are you and your larger team sort of managing how things are shifting maybe hour by hour, logistically, as far as you're trying to herd all these cats together and keep the school going?
Yeah, we have a pretty solid remote learning, that maybe we're thankful for COVID for something, and it set us up to be ready to do this. And we had learned so much every time there were many times, and I'm sure the same is true in the US, where schools were in person and then they went online and then they were in person. Every time we went online, we enhanced and reviewed our program and did things to develop it to make it better. So as we started planning for this, we were given some notice ahead of time that you might start planning. This is something that may be a little bit more intense than the last time the Russian soldiers were on the border, which did happen last spring as well. And so we started some planning and some thinking, and through an iterative process with the core leadership team, but the secondary leadership team, teachers, we really came together to say, what can we do? Because we'll need to honor kids in different time zones, which was a different factor for us. So our diploma program, which is grades 11 and 12, for those of you not familiar with the IB diploma program, that's a 2-year program. And so our students are in a 2-year program, especially grade 12 is on their way out. They're wrapping up their time, but our grade 11s, we have to figure out how do we honor the fact that they're in this 2-year program. And so we have them in sort of one space. They have classes in the evening Kyiv time, which is morning North America time, and it allows our kids to be together and learning. And then for our middle years program, so grade 6 through 10, those students have 2 different options for when they can join lessons. So that teachers are teaching the same lesson twice in one day, but they're allowing kids to join at a time that's more reasonable for their time zone, which means we have students joining us from Korea and Japan in their late evening, kind of 8 o'clock. The first time we actually, when we started, we only had one time when we were meeting, but it had, some of our students at 12 o'clock. I remember seeing one of our sixth graders. I was watching a video of the lesson, and he was just sort of like rocking. And I was like, okay, we have to shift. We've got to do something so that all kids have, access to the rich learning opportunities. And as we move forward next week, we're actually going to combine our classes together, because with some students going into local schools or other international schools, our class sizes have gotten smaller and our kind of engagement has decreased a little bit. And so we're bringing our kids together so that they have more time to be with one another. And then we're offering another spot where they can just go and learn together. They can go and work on their modules together, because in a classroom, your students don't sit silently and work, at least not in our classrooms. They're together, they're social. And that's, I think, a piece that kids are desperately missing, is that community feel and that social feel. So we're opening up some just social learning times. A teacher will be there, but it's really for those times usually where you've given some instruction, kids are off working, they raise their hand when they have a question, and we help them get unstuck. Because in that remote setting, kids don't have that opportunity to say, hey, I'm a little bit stuck, and they spin, 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 spin. So this helps them with that. And then it also, they can work with their friends or their classmates on collaborative activities.
Tremendous. Sounds like a lot of spreadsheets. Could you talk a little bit about the role of technology and how that has helped all of this, from the logistics to the learning to the big picture?
Absolutely. I mean, definitely spreadsheets. A copy of a spreadsheet and then a copy of a spreadsheet. I mean, that's one thing. But we utilize, so as part of our learning management system, we utilize in our middle years program a program called Toddle. And Toddle is newly developed. It's out of, it's actually based, it comes out of a company out of India, but it's specifically focused on the IB program. They have Toddle for the primary years program, middle years program, and then they just released it for the diploma program. So we use Toddle as our learning management system. Everything that a child needs is there. Their files are there. Their schedule is there as well. They can go into the classroom. We can embed either Google Meet links or Google or Zoom links for the lessons. We've given our teachers the opportunity to choose which one works better. For Google Meet or Zoom, we have specific security functions we have in place for both of those. And there's a lot of simulations, there's a lot of videos, there's a lot of, connection that students are making online. So Toddle helps us to do that. And actually Toddle has some really cool, innovative tools. It links to all the Google things that you might need, but then they also have a function called the workbook function, which is kind of like a Google document, but it actually helps self-pace students through a module that we have developed, and you can add on when a child is ready. So one thing that we've been really focusing in on is, how do we assess the readiness level of children to move on? We know we have to differentiate in a classroom, a brick and mortar classroom, but in an online classroom, that doesn't go away. And with students that are also experiencing trauma, we have to meet them where they are. So we're using our technology to just be a way we can help students when they're ready and put in place the different things so that they're not getting all of the assignments at the same time. We can self-pace when they're getting tasks and when they're getting assignments. And we have actually had to move away from like the grade book, because that was really stressful for students, because they were like, but I'm not there. So we're actually tracking data on different sheets so that we're using that collaboratively to look at student data. In our meetings, we're bringing that together so that we're looking at where students are and planning instruction. We are about to move to a team teaching model as well, so that we can bring two teachers together. Like our grade 6 science teachers are going to come together, teach all the science students at one time. Then they can go into breakout rooms, or they can organize their digital classroom to be a space where they can differentiate a little bit more effectively than if it's just one teacher in the room. And I mean, the other ways we use technology, we're staying connected. Technology has been so important to us in terms of getting our messages out to the world and having the world understand who PSI is and what's happening in Ukraine and how to support. We have a huge following on Twitter. We have a wonderful communications director who has really just launched an amazing campaign to get the world connected and understanding about PSI.
So excellent. I love a good silver lining story. And I like the idea of how the pandemic sort of inadvertently prepared for a larger catastrophe and being able to
Mhm.
adjust and hop right into that. Can you think of any other stories that were like this, felt like this became a missed opportunity, but then ended up coming around and being something useful and unexpected?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we're planning for now, like we're pretty set in, we're going to finish out the school year. Our school year ends in the middle of June, so it's a lot later than most of the Colorado schools or schools in North America. But as we plan for next school year, we'll have a smaller number of students. So we're seeing that as a gift. We're partnering with several organizations that offer online schooling to help us with our with the online options for students. And then we are hoping that we're going to open up a satellite campus in a neighboring country so that we can bring in those students who are either Ukrainian or their parents. A lot of businesses have set up shop in local or in neighboring countries so that they're engaged in the aid agencies, but then they're also ready to go back to Ukraine when it's safe for us to do that. So as part of that, we're really thinking around how do we personalize the program for our students? How do we really have student-centered classrooms where agency is at the heart of what we're doing, that there's choice and there's voice, options for students. So it's exciting to think about what we can do. So we are going to take the opportunity to restructure what our MYP looks like and how we engage with it. Um, Doing a lot of interdisciplinary units, having a huge focus on service. It's one thing we've been wanting to do. The pandemic did sort of take some service elements out of our program because people couldn't be in the same space. Kids couldn't travel in the same way, but we're going to really bring in that service element into our program, which is one of the key tenets of an IB education. But then also really have the opportunity for students to design their own learning, to every single day having time where they've decided this is what I'm learning, here's how I'm going to do it, here's my plan. So we're basing that work a lot on a guided inquiry model or some work from Trevor McKenzie. Dive into inquiry, we'll put those words out there because they're really great resources for teachers. And we're using that model to just really kind of help us. And so we'll take the criteria or the standards we need to assess, we'll look at where we're doing it in literacy, where we're doing it in math, how does the science curriculum unfold. And then we're going to have a chance for kids to look at those standards and look at those learning opportunities and choose, okay, these are the ones I want to work on right now. Here's how I'm going to do it. So it'll be really personalized and a lot of project-based learning for students. So there is a lot of excitement. And I think that's when I've shifted in the last week since we've been scenario planning, thinking about the future. I've shifted from a space of sort of grieving to a space of, okay, we can do this. This is actually going to be really cool. I'm the daughter of an educator. And he's like, Jesse, what a gift. I've always wanted to be able to build my own school from scratch. And so I kind of put that back, his words are in the back of my mind on a regular basis, but this is the one he's like, it's going to be so cool. So I have to remember there's a lot of hard work. But we've shifted, I think, from a phase of like making sure everyone is safe, because now we know that 95% of our staff and faculty and families are outside of Ukraine, and those that are in Ukraine are safe where they are. Where we've got kids placed in where they are, and so we're now in the process of thinking about next year. So we have a tagline that we have right now. It's called "Ending Strong, Emerging Stronger." So that's kind of that's sort of what we're thinking about as we go through the rest of the school year and get into next year. We have a very supportive board of governors. They're interested in keeping PSI alive because we are an independent school. We don't get funding from anyone but our parents. And so they're really striving to kind of help us and support us in keeping our school alive, because it is worth keeping alive.
It's a very amazing story. I mean, we very acceptable and expected to just hear that things are in maintenance mode. We're just trying to keep the lights on and let's just get through the school year. To hear that you're using this as an opportunity to really do incredibly progressive things inside of education is just wonderful to hear.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're excited.
Absolutely. Last question.
Have members on our team that are also excited about that, because we have some teachers finding jobs in other schools right now. So we may need some real progressive, innovative educators who want to join in a really cool team to do cool things. So
you hear that? Anybody thinking about going into international education? There's plenty of opportunities. Absolutely.
Yes, yes.
Well, Dr. Krueger, last question, and then I'll let you go. I know we're on opposite ends of the world, and you're obviously very busy. What have the last 2 years taught you and your team and community about resiliency?
I mean, so much, one thing is that young people are super resilient. I shared with you a story as we were chatting about a student who, the 3 days after the war started, was meeting with sixth graders who were online. And she said to me, "Don't worry, Dr. Krueger, we have a plan. I'm 30 kilometers from the Romanian border. And if we need to, we'll drive. So we're 3 kilometers and then we're going to walk and then we'll go through to Romania. I've watched videos. They're nice to the refugees. So I think we're going to be okay. So don't worry about me." And her voice sticks with me. One, I had the opportunity of teaching the sixth graders for our 2 weeks kind of in our transition time. And I spent so much time with these just beautiful young people. She was one of them. So it's just that they can bounce back. We can bounce back. And that when we stay connected, when we communicate, when we cry together and then try to laugh together, and just staying connected as a community has been really important for our resiliency. Being kind to others, meeting people where they are. So when we launched into our remote learning, we told students and teachers, if you're not ready, you do not need to be here. We want you to come when you're ready to be here. Some of them were transitioning to safer places. Others were just so much in shock. They didn't know what to do. It was their community that had been impacted. And so, it's just this sense of the human spirit. We will be stronger. Ukraine will be stronger when this is over. I'm privileged to work in the community that I do, to lead the teachers that I do, to interact with the students that I have, and to live in a country that is as dynamic and wonderful as Ukraine.
Got those goosebumps. I think you may have restored my faith in humanity. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Krueger, for sharing your personal story and your perspectives. Your story about your learning community and your vision ahead has just been inspiring. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks for all the take for granted stuff the inside of education, like the logistics of being on a conference panel while bouncing around Eastern Europe and making all of these logistical movements while juggling all of your students and your faculty. It's a real just a true story of resilience and deep inspiration for all of us. The ELK conference and I thank you so much, and we hope for better days ahead. And we'll certainly share out the links on how everybody can help support PSI going forward. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you for having me. It's been nice to be here today.